She needs to her place, the coach muttered. 12 seconds later, he was flat on his back, and every jaw in the dojo hung open, because the girl they mocked was Chuck Norris's granddaughter. Welcome to Chuck Norris Heroics. Let's uncover what really happened. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the dojo, casting long shadows over the polished wooden floor. The familiar sounds of punches striking bags and feet scraping against mats filled the air, punctuated by the sharp commands of the coach. The regular students moved with practiced precision, each absorbed in their training, unaware of the quiet stir about to unfold. The front door creaked open, drawing a few curious glances. A young girl stepped inside, her posture confident but cautious. She wore a simple white GI, perfectly clean and crisp, her dark hair pulled back tightly into a braid. Her eyes scanned the room steadily, taking in the intensity and focus of the other students. Whispers started to ripple around the edges of the dojo. Some recognized her, others only guessed. She moved toward the waiting area where the coach sat, clipboard in hand, observing his students with a sharp eye. Her footsteps were soft but sure. The coach looked up, his expression unreadable for a moment before he nodded slightly, acknowledging her presence. "I'm here to train," she said quietly but firmly, her voice steady and calm. The coach raised an eyebrow, then gestured toward the mats. "All right, get ready. We start with warm-ups." As she stepped onto the mat, a few of the older students exchanged skeptical looks. The dojo had never seen a new face quite like hers, especially not one who carried such an unmistakable aura of quiet strength. Some muttered under their breath, unsure if she belonged or was just another visitor. She didn't flinch. Instead, she squared her shoulders, focusing on the routine. Every movement she made was deliberate and precise, revealing a discipline that demanded respect even from the most hardened fighters. Outside, the fading daylight mirrored the brewing tension inside the dojo. The arrival of this new student was about more than just joining a class. It was the beginning of something that would shake the very foundation of the place. And no one, least of all her, could predict just how quickly the tides would turn. The dojo buzzed quietly with a mixture of curiosity and unease. As the new student moved through the room, practicing kata with precise, measured movements, eyes followed her from every corner. Whispered conversations floated just beneath the surface, questions, doubts, and cautious speculations. Who was she really? What was she doing here? Groups of students gathered in small clusters, casting sidelong glances. Some shook their heads subtly, exchanging smirks. A few younger fighters whispered, their voices tinged with disbelief. "That's Chuck Norris's granddaughter, right?" one asked, barely hiding a mixture of awe and skepticism. "Does she even need to be here?" Near the back, a pair of older boys leaned against the wall, crossing their arms. "If she thinks this is some kind of privilege, she's wrong," one muttered. "This is a dojo. We earn respect." The coach paced steadily, his eyes sharp but unreadable. He noticed the tension growing, but said nothing, letting the students' own attitudes reveal themselves. The new girl didn't seem bothered by the chatter or the sideways looks. Her gaze remained steady, focused on the form she practiced, her body moving through every stance and strike with flawless control. Yet beneath her calm exterior, she could feel the weight of every glance and whisper. It wasn't just about proving her skill. It was about breaking through a wall of assumptions and judgments. Each student who doubted her presence carried a piece of the challenge she would have to overcome. A few of the senior students approached hesitantly, their expressions mixing curiosity with subtle caution. One of them, a wiry boy with a sharp jawline, gave a nod of acknowledgement but didn't say a word. The unspoken question hung in the air. Was she ready to fight not just opponents, but the invisible currents swirling around her? Outside, the evening deepened, shadows stretching longer as if mirroring the tension inside. The dojo was more than a training ground tonight. It was a battlefield of reputation and respect. And every whispered word and cautious glance was a thread weaving the story that was just beginning to unfold. The morning light filtered softly through the dojo's windows, casting a pale glow over the wooden floors. The new student arrived early, the quiet calm before the day's storm. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the belt around her waist, an uncharacteristic flicker of nerves beneath her composed exterior. Today was her first full day, and though she carried the weight of a famous name, inside she was just a girl wanting to prove herself. She took a deep breath, steadying her heartbeat, but the jitters lingered like a shadow. The dojo was alive with the sound of fists striking pads, instructors shouting commands, and students moving in sync. Yet beneath the routine, the energy felt different, charged, expectant. Eyes would be on her, waiting for a slip, a mistake, something to prove she wasn't worthy. She entered the changing room, the echoes of her footsteps loud in the silence. As she pulled on her GI and tightened her belt, she caught her reflection in the mirror, a young woman determined but undeniably human, with the same fears and hopes as anyone else. The name she carried was a blessing and a burden. When she stepped onto the mat, the room seemed to shrink. The other students circled her with silent appraisal, their stares cutting sharper than any strike. The coach's gaze was steady but piercing, watching for signs of weakness or strength. Her limbs felt heavy, her muscles tense, not from lack of skill but from the weight of expectation. The warm-up drills began, and she forced herself to move, to focus on the rhythm and breath. The jitters ebbed slowly with every punch, every kick, every practice stance. Still, the whispers and the glances haunted the edges of her mind, reminding her that here, nothing came easy. A senior student approached, nodding slightly with a hint of encouragement, breaking the invisible barrier for just a moment. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. As the session pushed forward, she found a steady pulse beneath the nerves, a promise that this first day was just the start of something greater. The afternoon sun cast sharp lines across the dojo floor, highlighting the tension simmering beneath the practiced movements. The new student continued her drills, her focus unwavering despite the growing undercurrent of hostility. Whispers that had once been quiet ripples now swelled into open snickers and pointed comments. It started with a shove from one of the older boys as she passed. A quick, dismissive jab meant to unsettle, but she barely flinched. That only seemed to fuel their boldness. Laughter echoed from the corners of the room, mocking her every move. The way she adjusted her GI, the serious look she wore, even the calm breath she took before striking. "Think you're some kind of superstar?" One sneered. "You're just a show-off." More students gathered, their faces twisted in smirks and sneers. "Granddaughter of Chuck Norris? Huh, but she can't even land a real punch." Another taunted, stepping closer with a challenge in his eyes. They circled like wolves, their jeers growing louder, their confidence building from the crowd's reaction. She met their eyes steadily, refusing to shrink back, but the sting of their words was real. The dojo, once a place of discipline and respect, now felt like a battleground where she had to defend her right to belong. The coach watched from the sidelines, his expression tight, but he held his silence. His decision to intervene, or let her face this moment alone, would shape everything that followed. A sharp shove sent her stumbling, barely caught by a quick step. The room fell into a brief hush, then erupted with laughter. "Looks like the great Chuck Norris blood isn't flowing so strong, huh?" A voice mocked, dragging the silence into cruel amusement. The girl's jaw tightened. She wiped a bead of sweat from her brow and squared her shoulders. This was more than taunts. It was a test of grit, resolve, and the quiet strength she had inherited. And in the center of that mocking storm, she stood ready, because she knew what had to come next would change the course of everything. The laughter simmered down as the tension in the dojo thickened, heavy and electric. The boy who had pushed her stepped forward, his smirk growing wider, eyes gleaming with the thrill of confrontation. "If you think you belong here, prove it," he challenged loudly, voice cutting through the murmurs of the room. "Step up. Let's see if you can back up all that talk." The others closed in, forming a loose circle, eager to watch the showdown. The air felt charged with anticipation. Every student's gaze flicked between the challenger and the new girl. The coach remained silent, arms crossed, his eyes narrowing but his stance steady, letting the moment unfold. Without hesitation, she squared her shoulders and met the boy's gaze head-on. Her voice was calm but firm. "I don't need to prove anything to you. But if you want to fight, I'm not backing down." The boy laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the dojo walls. "Good. I was hoping you'd say that." The students shifted, some stepping back, others leaning in closer. The tension grew palpable as the pair moved to the center of the mat. She settled into a ready stance, feet planted firmly, hands raised with controlled precision. The boy mimicked her, cocky grin never leaving his face. A sharp command from the coach cut through the silence. "Begin." The boy lunged forward, quick and aggressive, throwing wild punches that aimed to overwhelm. She dodged smoothly, her movements fluid and measured, conserving energy, waiting for her moment. The circle of students grew silent, eyes wide as they witnessed the new girl's poise and skill under pressure. Her counters were sharp and precise, each strike delivered with intent, but without unnecessary force. The boy's grin faltered as he struggled to keep up, frustration creeping into his eyes. The challenge was no longer about proving who was tougher. It had become a quiet battle of respect, and in those brief moments, the dojo shifted. Something fundamental had begun to change. The dojo held its breath as the fight settled into a steady rhythm, the clash of movement speaking louder than any words could. The new student's every motion was calm and deliberate. No flash, no show, just pure, focused strength that seemed to flow effortlessly through her body. It was a quiet power, the kind that didn't demand attention but naturally drew it. Her opponent struck again, faster this time, testing her limits with aggressive jabs and kicks. But she met each one with a steady defense, her eyes never wavering, her body moving with a fluid grace that made even the most confident students pause in awe. She absorbed the pressure without panic, redirecting energy with subtle shifts and counters that spoke of deep training and discipline. The boy's confidence began to crack as she held her ground, his attacks growing more frantic, less controlled. The room was silent except for the soft sounds of feet sliding across mats and the controlled breaths of the fighters. Around them, the students watched, some leaning forward, caught in the quiet intensity. What made her stand apart wasn't just technique, it was her refusal to be rattled, the way she anchored herself in calm, steady focus. It was a strength that didn't shout but roared quietly beneath the surface. The whispers that once mocked her were now hushed, replaced by a growing respect that spread like wildfire. Her stance never faltered, her gaze locked on her opponent with an unspoken promise. She was here to fight, but more than that, she was here to endure and to rise. The challenge was no longer about proving lineage or fame. It was about showing what true resilience looked like when words failed. When she struck a precise counter, forcing the boy to stumble back, the dojo erupted, not with jeers, but with a swell of approval. The silent strength of Chuck Norris's granddaughter was no longer a question. It was a quiet declaration that would echo far beyond these walls. The coach's voice cut sharply through the heavy silence, carrying the weight of years spent guiding fighters through moments like this. "Enough," he called out, stepping forward with a firm tone that demanded immediate attention. "This isn't a street fight. Control your temper and respect the dojo." The boy, flushed with frustration and breath heavy, shot a glare toward the new student, but his eyes flicked briefly toward the coach. For a moment, it seemed he might heed the warning, slow down, regain composure. But pride and anger pushed him past caution. With a snarl, he lunged again, throwing a reckless punch that barely missed the girl's jaw. She moved quickly, sidestepping with grace, but the impact of the boy's wild aggression rattled the room. The students gasped, some stepping back in surprise, others exchanging uneasy glances. The coach's expression hardened. "I said enough," he repeated, voice low but carrying authority. He moved closer, ready to intervene, but the boy wasn't finished. Fueled by ego and the need to dominate, he threw another punch, faster and more reckless than before. The new student's eyes flashed, but she remained calm, absorbing the blow with a practiced ease. The coach stepped in swiftly, placing a firm hand on the boy's shoulder. "You're out of control. That's not how we train here." The boy shrugged off the hand with a snarl. "She needs to learn the hard way." He spat back, chest heaving, unwilling to back down. "If she wants respect, she'll have to take it." The coach's jaw clenched. Respect is earned through discipline, not by breaking the rules. For a tense moment, the dojo was caught between two forces: the coach's steady authority and the boy's reckless defiance. The new student watched silently, knowing this moment was a test far beyond the physical, one of character, restraint, and the true meaning of strength. The challenge wasn't over. If anything, it was just beginning. The coach finally signaled for a controlled sparring session, hoping to channel the rising tension into something disciplined. The boy squared off against the new student once more, this time with an air of grudging respect, but the fire still burned fiercely in his eyes. The room quieted, the other students stepping back to watch closely. Their movements were sharp, deliberate. The boy launched quick strikes, testing her defenses with a mixture of aggression and precision. She responded with calm counters, her body flowing like water around his attacks. Each block and parry executed with fluid efficiency. The energy between them crackled with intensity, a battle of wills as much as skill. Sweat glistened on their brows as the exchange intensified. Neither gave ground easily. The boy's frustration grew as his blows were deflected or absorbed, his breathing quickening. He tried feints and combinations, hoping to find an opening in her steady guard, but she remained unshaken, cool under pressure. The new student's calm demeanor only seemed to fuel his anger, and at one point, he threw a harder punch that grazed her shoulder. The dojo gasped, but she barely flinched, returning a precise strike to his ribs that made him stagger slightly. The balance shifted, and murmurs of surprise and approval rippled through the watching students. The coach's voice cut through the tension again, calm but firm. "Focus on technique, not brute force. Remember control." His eyes locked on both fighters, making sure the lesson was clear. The boy nodded reluctantly, breathing ragged, but eyes still burning with determination. The girl maintained her composed stance, the quiet confidence of someone who had trained long and hard for this moment. As the sparring round ended, it was clear the new student was no ordinary fighter. She had faced the heat of hostility and emerged steady, controlled, and undeniably strong. The dojo had witnessed something new, a force quietly reshaping their understanding of respect and strength. The sparring session had settled into a tense rhythm, the students watching with rapt attention as skill and will collided on the mat. But beneath the surface, not everyone was satisfied with the silent challenge the new student represented. A few faces in the crowd twisted into scorn, unwilling to accept her quiet dominance. Then it happened. A sharp, calculated jab, not aimed at the body or limbs, but a disrespectful strike to her pride. As she turned away from a blocked punch, a younger student, emboldened by the crowd's murmurs, pushed her roughly in the back. The movement was subtle but deliberate, a test of boundaries, a silent declaration of disdain. The dojo fell into an uneasy hush, eyes widening at the unexpected breach of respect. The new student stumbled but caught herself instantly, never letting her balance falter. Her expression remained calm, but the flicker of fire in her eyes was unmistakable. The boy who had been sparring smirked, catching the shift in mood. "You gonna take that?" he taunted, voice dripping with challenge. "Or are you all talk like your granddad?" Laughter bubbled up from the surrounding students, some jeering, others unsure whether to intervene. The coach's face tightened, but he held back, watching to see how she would respond. She turned slowly, her gaze sweeping over the crowd before settling on the boy who had spoken. Her voice was low, steady, and cold with quiet authority. "Respect is not given because of a name," she said. "It is earned every day with every action." The boy's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. The crowd's laughter died down, replaced by a charged silence. The new student's words echoed in the air, carrying more weight than any strike could. In that moment, the dojo saw not just a fighter, but a force of conviction and dignity. The moment of disrespect had been met with something far stronger, a quiet, unyielding strength that refused to be broken. The charged silence hung thick in the air as the new student straightened, the weight of the dojo's eyes heavy on her shoulders. Without hesitation, she stepped forward, moving deliberately toward the center of the mat where the boy who had challenged her stood. Her posture was steady, every movement confident but controlled. She met his gaze with unwavering resolve, the fire in her eyes matching the intensity of the crowd's attention. This was no longer about proving skill or lineage. It was about asserting her place and demanding the respect she deserved. The murmurs of the students faded into quiet anticipation as they sensed something pivotal was unfolding. Without a word, she lifted her hands into a fighting stance, signaling readiness. The boy's smirk returned, but there was a flicker of caution now, as if he recognized that this fight had shifted from a simple sparring match to something more personal. The coach stepped back, his sharp gaze never leaving the two fighters. The room seemed to hold its breath as the new student launched the first strike, not with reckless force, but with precise, measured power. Her movements flowed like water, each punch and kick carefully calculated, a testament to her disciplined training. Her opponent stumbled under the weight of her skill, struggling to keep pace with her fluid counters and unyielding defense. The dojo watched, caught between disbelief and growing respect. This was no ordinary fight, it was a statement. As the exchange continued, it became clear the granddaughter of Chuck Norris was not here to simply join the dojo. She was here to transform it. Her silent strength was now an undeniable presence, a force reshaping the unspoken rules and expectations that had long governed this place. With every strike, every block, every step, she carved out her place, not by shouting or showmanship, but by standing firm and fighting with unwavering dignity. The dojo had witnessed the moment when the granddaughter stepped up and claimed her rightful place. The room's energy surged, crackling with tension as the new student and her opponent faced off. Their movements were swift and purposeful, each strike a test of skill and will. But the growing intensity was edging toward something more dangerous, a spark that threatened to ignite beyond control. Suddenly, the coach stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention. His voice rang out, firm and clear, slicing through the charged atmosphere. Enough! This is not a fight to settle grudges. This is a place of discipline and respect. Both fighters paused, their breathing heavy, eyes locked onto him. The boy, chest heaving, glanced at the coach with a mixture of frustration and begrudging acceptance. The new student's calm steadiness did not waver, but she lowered her hands in acknowledgement. The coach's gaze softened slightly as he addressed them both. You're here to learn, to grow, not to break each other down. Strength comes from control, not chaos. Remember that. He stepped between them, raising his hands to signal the end of the sparring. Around the dojo, the students exhaled collectively, the tension easing as the coach's words settled over them like a calming tide. Turning to the boy, the coach's tone sharpened. You've got talent, but talent alone isn't enough. Without respect and discipline, it's meaningless. If you can't control yourself, you don't belong here. The boy's jaw tightened, but he nodded, the fight in his eyes dimming to something more reflective. The new student watched quietly, the coach's intervention reinforcing the lesson she had silently been proving with every move. The coach then looked directly at the granddaughter, his voice carrying a note of approval. You've got the skill and the heart. Keep that focus. It will carry you farther than you know. As he stepped back, the dojo felt the weight of his judgment and guidance. The fight was over, but the lessons lingered, lessons about strength, respect, and the true meaning of honor in their shared journey ahead. The dojo was settling back into a calm rhythm after the coach's intervention when suddenly, an unexpected surge shattered the fragile peace. The boy, eyes blazing with frustration and wounded pride, lashed out with a swift, sharp strike, one that caught everyone off guard. His fist connected with a forceful blow, not aimed at sparring, but fueled by anger. The new student barely had time to react. The strike landed across her shoulder, jolting her balance. The room gasped in shock, the air thick with disbelief. The boy's reckless move was a clear breach of the dojo's rules, a momentary loss of control that sent ripples through the gathered students. She stumbled but didn't fall. Her expression tightened, pain flickering beneath the calm surface, but her stance remained steady. The unexpected blow was more than physical. It was a challenge to her spirit, a test she hadn't anticipated but was ready to face. The coach moved instantly, stepping between them with authority. "That's enough." His voice thundered through the dojo, sharp and uncompromising. "This is not what we stand for." The boy's chest heaved as he stared down the coach, defiance still burning in his eyes. "She needs to learn," he spat out, voice rough with frustration. "This isn't a game." The coach's gaze was icy. "Discipline is not optional. You're here to learn control, not to throw wild punches out of anger." Turning to the new student, he offered a nod of support. "Are you all right?" She nodded, the brief flash of pain fading into determination. "I'm fine. This only makes me stronger." The dojo was silent, the weight of the moment settling on everyone present. The unexpected blow had shaken the room, but it also revealed something deeper, a resilience in the granddaughter that no reckless strike could break. In that charged silence, the dojo understood. Strength was not just in power, but in the courage to stand tall when faced with the unexpected. The moment stretched, heavy and thick, as silence suddenly fell over the dojo. The usual sounds of movement, breathing, and shifting feet ceased, replaced by an almost tangible stillness that held everyone captive. Every pair of eyes fixed on the new student, whose steady stance had not wavered despite the unexpected blow. Her breath was calm, but the room sensed the weight behind it, an unspoken message that something profound was unfolding. The boy who had struck her lowered his gaze, the fire in his eyes dimming under the weight of the silence. The laughter and whispers that had once filled the room were gone, replaced by a collective pause. The coach stood tall, his stern expression softened by a flicker of respect. He scanned the faces around him, students who had come in with judgment, suspicion, and doubt, and now saw something different reflected back. The quiet strength of the granddaughter had shifted the entire atmosphere, turning mockery into reflection. One by one, the students lowered their fists, their postures relaxing as the tension drained away. The boy who had struck hesitated, then took a slow step back, his shoulders heavy with the realization of what had just transpired. No words were spoken, but the silence itself spoke volumes, about respect earned, about battles fought not just with fists but with character. In that stillness, the dojo transformed. It was no longer just a training ground for physical skill, but a place where inner strength and resilience held equal weight. The new student's presence was no longer a challenge to be dismissed, but a force to be acknowledged. As the quiet settled deeper, the coach finally broke the silence with a steady voice. "Let this be a lesson for us all." The dojo exhaled collectively. The moment passed, but never forgotten. Silence had fallen, but from it, something far stronger was rising, a new beginning built on respect, discipline, and unwavering strength. The stillness that followed the unexpected blow was suddenly broken, not by calm, but by a surge of shock and confusion rippling through the dojo. The students exchanged uncertain glances, some whispering hurriedly, while others simply stood frozen, struggling to process the weight of what had just happened. A few younger fighters whispered, voices shaky. "Did she just take that punch without even flinching?" one asked, eyes wide with disbelief. "Who is she really?" Others shifted nervously, the air thick with unspoken questions. The boy who had struck her looked unsettled, his confidence shaken more by her reaction than the strike itself. He stared at his own fists, as if for the first time realizing the impact, not just physical, but on the fragile balance of respect within the dojo. The coach's gaze swept over the room, noting the uncertainty. He raised his voice, steady but firm, trying to bring order. Focus. This is a place of learning, not chaos. Remember why you're here. But even his words struggled to cut through the swirling confusion. The new student stood poised and silent, the calm eyeing the storm. Her steady presence contrasted sharply with the turmoil around her, making the question on everyone's lips all the more urgent. Who was this girl who carried not just a famous name, but a strength that unsettled even the toughest fighters? The dojo's usual rhythm was disrupted. The students who had mocked her now hesitated, their scorn replaced by a wary respect that felt almost foreign. Some searched each other's faces for answers, trying to understand the shift that had taken place so quickly. Amid the shock and confusion, a quiet realization began to take root, that this was no ordinary newcomer, and the challenges ahead would test more than just skill. The lesson was unfolding, messy and raw, demanding that every fighter rethink what strength truly meant. The dojo buzzed softly with the tension of unasked questions, the first tremors of change rippling through its very foundation. Whispers had been swirling quietly since the new student's arrival, but now the truth began to surface like a tide breaking through silence. Someone finally spoke, low but clear, breaking the thick tension. She's Chuck Norris's granddaughter. The words spread quickly, igniting a fresh wave of astonishment and curiosity. The dojo seemed to shift on its axis. Suddenly, every past moment, the calm strength, the unexpected blow taken without faltering, the silent defiance, was seen through a new lens. Chuck Norris wasn't just a legend in movies. He was a symbol of discipline, resilience, and unmatched martial skill. And now, his legacy was standing right in front of them, quiet but undeniably powerful. The coach stepped forward, his voice steady but tinged with a newfound respect. Her family's name carries weight, but it's not just about who she is. It's about what she chooses to be. Strength isn't inherited, it's earned every day. His words rippled through the room, touching nerves and sparking reflection. Students who had once doubted now found themselves grappling with a complicated mix of awe and expectation. Some approached cautiously, eager to learn from the granddaughter of a man whose reputation was larger than life. Others felt the pressure mounting, realizing the bar had just been raised. The new student stood quietly, aware of the shifting tides, but refusing to let the legacy define her completely. She had come here not to rest on a famous name, but to forge her own path through sweat, discipline, and hard work. The echoes of her grandfather's strength were in her blood, but her spirit was her own. Stories began to emerge, tales of Chuck Norris's legendary discipline, his relentless training, and the unbreakable will that had shaped generations. The dojo absorbed these stories like fuel, lighting a fire of determination. In that moment, the legacy wasn't just revealed, it was reborn. The granddaughter had arrived, not just to follow in his footsteps, but to carve out a new chapter in a story that was far from over. The atmosphere in the dojo began to shift subtly, but unmistakably. The initial shock and doubt gave way to something more hopeful, an emerging sense of unity. Students who had once whispered behind the granddaughter's back now found themselves drawn to her side, their curiosity transforming into respect and even admiration. Small groups gathered around her during breaks, offering tips and sharing stories of their own struggles. The once cold glances were replaced with nods of encouragement and genuine smiles. A senior student, known for his strictness, approached quietly and said, "You've got grit. Keep that up, and you'll go far here." The coach watched the growing camaraderie with a satisfied nod. He knew that the true strength of any dojo wasn't just in skill, but in the bonds forged through shared challenges and mutual respect. The granddaughter's presence was becoming a catalyst, inspiring others to rise above petty rivalries and focus on what mattered most, their craft. Even a boy who had struck her began to soften, his posture less defensive. He exchanged brief, hesitant words with her after class, signaling a tentative truce. It was a small but significant step toward healing the fractures that had formed. The students rallied around her not because of her famous name alone, but because of the quiet determination she had shown, standing tall in the face of adversity without losing her dignity or focus. She wasn't just earning respect, she was building a community. Training sessions became livelier, infused with a renewed energy. Partners pushed each other harder, motivated by the example set before them. The dojo felt less like a battleground and more like a team, united in pursuit of a common goal. In the quiet moments between drills, the granddaughter allowed herself a brief smile, recognizing the shift not just in others but within herself. She wasn't just fighting for acceptance anymore. She was fighting for something greater, belonging. The dojo's atmosphere had transformed, but the real test was far from over. Training intensified, each session demanding more. More focus, more endurance, more resilience. The granddaughter pushed herself harder than ever, knowing that under the weight of expectation, there was no room for weakness. Every movement was precise, every strike deliberate. The coach increased the rigor, setting challenging drills that tested both skill and spirit. Students watched as she moved through the grueling exercises, sweat pouring, muscles straining, yet never faltering. The pressure was palpable, but she bore it with quiet determination, embracing it as part of her journey. The weight of her family's legacy was an invisible force pressing on her shoulders, but she refused to let it define her limits. Instead, it fueled her resolve. When fatigue threatened to overwhelm, she grounded herself in discipline, recalling lessons passed down not just through blood, but through hard-earned experience. The other students matched her intensity, inspired by her example. The dojo echoed with the sounds of effort, the thud of fists striking pads, the sharp breaths of controlled exertion, the rhythmic steps of footwork drills. Yet beneath the physical strain lay a deeper battle, mastering the mind as much as the body. The boy who had once challenged her now worked alongside her, the tension between them softened by shared sweat and mutual respect. They sparred with focus and care, each learning from the other in a way that transcended rivalry. The coach observed closely, occasionally stepping in to correct form or offer encouragement. Pressure reveals true strength. He reminded them during one session. It's how you respond that defines you. The granddaughter's eyes flashed with determination. She knew this was more than training. It was forging the character that would carry her beyond the dojo's walls. Under the relentless pressure, she grew not just stronger, but wiser, readying herself for the challenges still to come. Every drop of sweat was a step closer to mastering her own path, proving that true strength was born through struggle and unyielding dedication. The days that followed marked a turning point for the entire dojo. The atmosphere shifted from skepticism and tension to one charged with respect and renewed purpose. The granddaughter's quiet determination had become a beacon, drawing not only admiration, but also inspiring a profound change in the attitudes of her peers. Students began to approach her with genuine interest, seeking advice and partnership in training. The walls that once held whispers of doubt now echoed with supportive cheers and encouragement. The dojo was becoming a place where strength was measured not by bravado, but by dedication, discipline, and respect. Even the boy who had challenged her early on now walked with a different air, his once defiant glare softened by understanding. He acknowledged her skill openly, and their sparring sessions became lessons in mutual growth rather than conflict. The coach's earlier warnings had taken root, fostering an environment where control and respect reigned. The coach himself noticed the transformation with quiet pride. He spoke to the group one evening, his voice steady and clear. Respect is earned through actions, not words. What you've seen here is the true meaning of strength, both physical and mental. The students absorbed his words, the message resonating deeply as they reflected on their own journeys. The granddaughter's presence had challenged their preconceptions, reminding them that legacy was not about inherited fame, but about the daily grind, the silent battles fought in training rooms and in their own minds. The dojo thrummed with renewed energy. Training was no longer a competition for dominance, but a collective pursuit of excellence. Partnerships formed across previous divides, and the shared goal of improvement bound them together. In the quiet moments between sessions, the granddaughter allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The respect she had long sought was no longer something she needed to fight for. It was freely given, earned through steadfast heart and unyielding effort. The dojo was no longer the same place it had been. It was stronger, united, and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Tension hummed beneath the surface as word spread quickly. There would be a rematch. The announcement came unexpectedly during a routine training session, the coach's voice steady but commanding. It's time to settle this properly. A fair fight, under full control. No distractions, no grudges, just skill. The dojo buzzed with anticipation. Students gathered around the mat, the air thick with excitement and nerves. The boy who had first challenged the granddaughter stepped forward, his eyes locked with hers. This time, a mixture of respect and determination shining through. She met his gaze without hesitation, ready for what lay ahead. The rematch wasn't just a fight. It was a chance to redefine the story between them, to prove who had grown stronger in more ways than one. The coach outlined the rules clearly: controlled sparring, emphasis on technique and discipline. Remember, he reminded them, this is about growth and respect, not domination. As the bell rang, both fighters moved with a new kind of focus. The boy launched measured attacks, testing her defense without the reckless aggression that had marked their earlier encounters. She responded with calm precision, her counters flowing naturally, reflecting the countless hours of training under pressure. The dojo watched, captivated by the shifting dynamic. The rematch was no longer a battle of ego, but a dance of skill and mutual acknowledgement. Each exchange deepened the respect between them, their movements mirroring the discipline the coach had instilled. Sweat glistened under the dojo lights, breaths coming steady and controlled. The granddaughter's confidence shone through, not in bravado, but in quiet mastery. The boy matched her stride for stride, a silent promise to improve and honor the challenge. When the final bell sounded, the dojo erupted, not with cheers for victory alone, but with applause for growth and sportsmanship. The rematch had become more than a fight. It was a testament to transformation, unity, and the true spirit of martial arts. In that moment, both fighters knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one built on respect, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of excellence. The morning light filtered through the dojo windows as the granddaughter prepared for her upcoming match. Unlike previous bouts driven by raw emotion, this time her approach was methodical and deliberate. She knew the importance of strategy. Every move planned, every weakness studied, every moment accounted for. Sitting quietly before training began, she reviewed the lessons learned from her earlier encounters. The boy who had challenged her was no longer an unpredictable force of anger, but a competitor with strengths and vulnerabilities she had carefully observed. Her mind mapped out possible scenarios, anticipating his tactics and preparing counters with calm precision. Her coach watched thoughtfully, recognizing the subtle shift from reactive fighting to calculated mastery. Strategy isn't just about offense, he reminded her. It's about patience, timing, and understanding your opponent and yourself. Training sessions became less about brute strength and more about finesse. She practiced feints, footwork, and reading body language. Each drill honed her ability to anticipate and adapt, to control the flow of the fight rather than simply responding to it. Her sparring partners noticed the change. Movements that once relied on speed and power were now layered with purpose and cunning. The granddaughter seemed to flow through her opponent's defenses with an almost effortless grace, her strikes landing precisely where they would have the greatest impact. Even the boy she was set to face next observed from the sidelines, a newfound respect in his eyes. He understood that this fight would be different, not just a contest of strength, but a battle of minds. As the day of the rematch approached, the granddaughter felt a quiet confidence settle within her. She knew that success would not come from aggression alone, but from the thoughtful execution of a well-crafted plan. In the stillness before the storm, she embraced the true essence of martial arts, the harmony of body, mind, and spirit, ready to prove that her greatest strength was not just in her fists, but in her strategy. The dojo was packed. Every student and instructor gathered around the mat, the air electric with anticipation. This was not just another sparring match. It was a turning point, a fight that promised to rewrite the story they had all been watching unfold. The granddaughter and her opponent faced each other with steady eyes, each knowing what was at stake. The bell rang sharply, slicing through the charged silence. The boy moved first, launching a series of quick, calculated strikes. But the granddaughter was ready. Her body flowed smoothly, weaving and countering with a precision born of careful strategy and relentless training. Every move was deliberate, her timing impeccable. The crowd watched, breathless, as the battle unfolded like a dance. Neither fighter wasted energy. Each attack and block was purposeful, measured. The granddaughter's calm control contrasted sharply with the boy's raw intensity, but neither could claim clear dominance. As the rounds progressed, it became clear that this was more than a fight. It was a lesson in respect, discipline, and growth. The dojo's energy shifted from excitement to reverence as both fighters pushed themselves beyond skill into something deeper. Sweat dripped, breaths came hard, but their focus never wavered. The granddaughter landed a decisive strike, not with force, but with perfect timing, catching her opponent off guard. The boy stumbled, then regained balance, nodding in acknowledgement of her skill. When the final bell rang, silence fell before erupting into applause. The crowd wasn't just cheering a victory, they were celebrating transformation. The fight had changed everything. Old grudges faded, replaced by a shared respect that bound the dojo tighter than ever. The granddaughter and the boy bowed to each other, their eyes reflecting newfound understanding. This fight wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where strength was measured not by dominance, but by honor and unity. In that moment, the dojo stood united, forever changed by a fight that had proven the true meaning of martial arts. The final echoes of applause faded, and the dojo settled into a quiet reverence. The coach stood at the edge of the mat, his usual stern demeanor softened by a rare, reflective smile. For weeks, he had watched the turmoil, the clashes, and the growth that had unfolded under his watch. Now, standing before his students, he felt a deep sense of redemption, not just for himself, but for the dojo as a whole. He cleared his throat, capturing everyone's attention. "I've been a strict man," he began, voice steady but humble. "Sometimes too focused on discipline and order, I missed the importance of patience and understanding." His gaze swept across the room, landing briefly on the granddaughter and her opponent. "This journey has reminded me that true leadership is not just about enforcing rules, but about guiding with compassion." The students listened intently, the coach's words carrying a weight that resonated deeply. He spoke of his early days as a fighter and instructor, the mistakes he made, and the lessons learned the hard way. "Strength isn't just in your fists," he said. "It's in your hearts and your willingness to grow." Turning to the granddaughter, he nodded with quiet approval. "You've shown what it means to face adversity with dignity and determination. You've taught us all that legacy is more than a name. It's the character we build through every choice." He then addressed the boy who had challenged her, acknowledging his courage and growth. "You've both earned your place here, not just through skill, but through respect." The coach's redemption was more than personal. It was a healing for the entire dojo. Walls built on judgment and rivalry had crumbled, replaced by a foundation of mutual respect and shared purpose. As the session ended, students gathered around, their spirits lifted by the coach's words and the transformation they had witnessed. The dojo was reborn, stronger and wiser, led by a coach who had found redemption not just in victory, but in growth and forgiveness. The days following the climactic fight were filled with quiet reflection and renewed energy. The dojo buzzed with an unmistakable sense of camaraderie, as students came together not just as competitors, but as a community bound by shared lessons and hard-won respect. Training sessions carried a different tone, less about proving dominance and more about mutual growth. Partners exchanged tips, offered encouragement, and pushed each other with kindness and determination. The granddaughter's presence had become a unifying force, inspiring others to look beyond rivalry and focus on collective improvement.